How do you explain a country where the state deliberately weaponizes ignorance? I know that when I say these things, a lot of you find it difficult to understand or to relate because you believe that perhaps these words are extreme. But how do you explain a country that places primacy on the comfort of the rulers at the expense of basic education? A country where children are going to schools in classrooms without roof, under trees, exposed to the elements. How do you explain that the rulers of that country are driving around in billion naira cars? Not just the president. It's easy to point at Bulaba. What about the state governors? What about the chairmen of the local government councils? What about those ones? How is it so difficult in a country as blessed as Nigeria to fund primary education? And I'm just talking about physical structures now. How about the human resource? The persons who are meant to be teaching persons, how educated are they? What are the consequences of these choices? And that is at the basic level. Look, there is something I have taught for some time, and it is what religion does to the mind. And I'm still going to talk about religion, but what I want to talk about right now is not religion per se. But I want to explain what happens when you leave a mind untrained, uneducated, undirected to purpose, which is why I speak consistently to the weaponization of ignorance. The word religion comes from the Latin root religare. Religare means to bind. I once possessed a dictionary known as the World Book Dictionary, and it had illustration and it had an etymology section as well. And when you check religion under the World Book Dictionary entry, you'd find what I'm explaining to you now, Old Latin, religare. You'd also find it if you go to Google. But there was something extra in the World Book Dictionary. It had illustration. And the illustration that was in my childhood dictionary was one of a finch, tiny bird. It had its wing bound, which meant that it couldn't fly. It couldn't do what was natural to it. That is the duty of religion, to bind your imagination so that you do not think outside accepted parameters. Every religion does that. That's why it's got all the rules, commandments, and everything. Now, when you now imagine a mind that is offered no structure from birth, beyond what the perverse society into which it has been battered give to it sociologically in conditioning it is nurture or poison. Now imagine that a state deliberately, because I don't know how else to explain it, consistently for the last 20 years, Nigeria has had an out of school children population of 10 million at any point in time in the last 20 years. It has had at least 10 million children out of school. Now, do the maths. If there are 200 million of us, and you've consistently had that many number of children out of school, what happens is that you can extrapolate and say that today you've got about 50 million young adults who are functional illiterates, untrained to do anything beyond survival at the basic level. That is your population of Agbero, bandits, terrorists, armed robbers, beggars, who are beyond school age. That's where they're sourced from. That is the real-time consequences of the choices that have been made by the state. And I am speaking to the ones that you can catch in terms of extrapolation. Now, when you have rendered a man the subject of weaponized ignorance, what you have done is that you have fettered his imagination, and his capacity to create value has been handicapped. That assures his poverty ultimately. Now, you have weaponized poverty, you have weaponized ignorance unleashed against the people deliberately by the system, systemic, over years. What do you expect that this would birth? We are a republic of pyromaniacs. We've set the damn house on fire. I keep shouting, maybe somebody will hear. Or it could very well be, as I've told you in the past, I wasn't writing for you. Maybe I'm not even speaking to you. Maybe I'm speaking against you so that a future generation might know that one of us was not insane, even though I'm the one you call insane. You weaponize religion to the point where the candidate's religiosity matters more than his competence or qualification. That is in addition to the weaponization of ethnicity, turning what should be a strength into a curse, our diversity that should strengthen us, suddenly is inversed and turned into a cancer tearing us apart. Pyromaniacs. What do you think are the consequences of these things that you're doing today? Yoruba against Igbo, Igbo against Yoruba, Fulani against Hausa, Hausa against Fulani, this one against that one, Ijo against Kalabari, Calabar, all because of choices focused on today, incapable of thinking beyond the moment. Small minds, pyromaniacs. And it's not just the rulers, it's each and every one of us. Pyromaniacs setting our house on fire. Where would the children live? Where would you live? Mobilize hatred once our interests are not served. Very soon you hear, in fact, not very soon, it's already happening. When you look at the combatants in rivers, they're already talking upland, Ibijo, this one, that one. When Wike and Sim were busy sharing it, did they tell you that there were any differences between them? So all of a sudden, because they are squabbling over their loot, Rivers people are going to be divided and reminded of old fault lines all over again. And some of you will join them in weaponizing this hatred. And you think I am wrong when I describe all of us as pyromaniacs. It's easy to point fingers at the ruiners. When was the last time you looked in the mirror when you're looking for the reason where we are? When was the last time you looked in the mirror? Republic of Pyromaniacs. The country itself deliberately divides quota system, educationally disadvantaged state, this one, that one. Now you have zoning that has never made any difference to the unification of the people that have been deliberately torn apart. Zoning in the mud now. Look, there are consequences for every action. Each and every one of these actions have consequences. Look at the judicial anarchy that has been let loose on Nigeria today. Nobody, except perhaps Wike and Bulaba, goes to our court expecting to get anything positive. We find the outliers, because let me be very clear, although I'll teach this on some future date, but let me explain something very quickly. I am not afflicted by the Elijah syndrome. The Elijah syndrome is the one where the prophet begins to believe that he is the only one in the land. I have no such illusion. I know that there are plenty of my type all over the place. So I'm not suggesting that there is anything that I am doing that no other person can not do. Plenty of people can do and have done better than I am doing, and they will do better even when I'm no more. But the point is this: the judicial anarchy you're seeing today was clearly predicted. You cannot govern a state by the whims of men and not have a scale of justice that totters constantly. The scale of justice will continue to totter without any certainty for as long as we continue to pander to the whims of men. There are consequences for every compromise that is made to a system that should not be compromised. The compromises did not start last year. It did not start 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. The compromises were always there. The only thing that has happened is that the compromises have been compromised. Yeah. And now compromises have been democratized. Once upon a time, you had the occasional aberrant judgment. Now, every judgment does one's head in. That is the consequence of the pyromaniacal choices that were made when the judiciary became the plaything of politicians. Look, in the absence of the rule of law, there must be the administration of impunity. In the administration of impunity, there must be a prescriptive interpreter of the law. In our country today, it is unfortunate, very, very unfortunate, that judicial confidence is at an all-time low. And this is not the fault of the victims of Nigeria. It is based on the choices that have been made within the judiciary and by the system itself. In the absence of the rule of law, what we have had is the rule of impunity. And in the absence of the administration of justice, what we have had essentially is the administration of impunity. Yorubas have this proverb. They say, "Bọ́mọdé bá ń gégi nígboro, àgbàlagbà mọ ibi tá a wó sí." There's another version of it that says, "Tọ́mọdé bá ń gégi nígbó, àgbàlagbà ló mọ ibi tó ń wó sí." I would explain. He says, when a child is cutting a tree, it is the elder that will know where the tree will fall. This speaks to the consequences that are sometimes intended or unintended. A child, a young person, applies himself to bringing down the tree. But the elder within the vicinity would pay attention to where the tree is lilting or tilting so that by the time it will fall, he would have warned each person that might be in the vicinity so that they might take cover and avoid having themselves crushed by the falling tree. The instructive thing about this is that it speaks to the focus, mission focus of the immature child who is not paying attention to extraneous factors such as where the tree will eventually fall. That is the unfortunate reality in which I find myself a lot of times. I am cursed with the inability not to see. I must see. I will see. At all times, when we are making these choices as individuals, as a collective, particularly in the context of my discussion with you this morning, as a collective, as Nigerians, when these choices are being made, I've been left most perplexed because I live in the future that I see being destroyed. I'm incapable of living in the moment except when I am in pursuit of my own carnal pleasure. Outside of the pursuit of my carnal pleasure, I constantly live in the future where I see the results of the pyromaniacal choices that have been made. When Yusuf was killed, Boko Haram was battered. It didn't have to happen. It was a choice made by the Nigerian state and its rulers. Man was caught alive, but he couldn't be tried. They couldn't have him talking in a court because he was a tool of the system. So they killed him. That was the beginning of Boko Haram. Agbero, when I was growing up, by the time I came to Lagos in 1985, it was only a small pocket, restricted largely to the major bus stops. Major, as in major, very, you find them few and far between. And Agbero must not be confused with area boys, even though now it's become one. And it's become one in a more sinister fashion. But those are choices made. Kids who came into Lagos from the rural areas, kids who were born in Lagos without access to education or with limited opportunities, they swell the ranks of the Agberos. And today, because they have aspirations, it's easier to climb through the rank as an Agbero to become an MC, for instance, than to rise through the rank to become a lawyer, a doctor. The persons they have to aspire to, the role models that the youth have today, the ones who have money to burn, are the Agberos. So, what do you expect? So, you have a situation today where, as a collective, we've built a society where the consequences of the choices made are catching up with us. Our Almajiris, that was always a deliberate system. But what was once the exclusive preserve of the North has become a Nigerian thing. The Almajiris of the North are your area boys and Agio in the South. I know what they're called up East. Banditry, those are choices made. The children that were untrained, remember I told you that like 50 million that had no education, no purpose given to them are the ones. Do you understand? At the end of the day, how many of you with your phones, your smartphones and things are actually available to fight the battles that you must fight? Militancy in the Niger Delta, those are consequences of choices made. Young men that were harmed and used for political purposes who became on their own warlords, able to command big money. Some are today traditional rulers, contractors for the Nigerian state. Some even confessing on camera how they've killed on behalf of the Nigerian state. Those are the choices made. Pyromaniacs. Biafra, their choices made. Odua Republicans, their choices made. These are the result of the choices made. Some would mobilize separatists so that their political interests might be highlighted. These are the choices we've made, and that is why our house is practically on fire.